Andy Cotgreave. Many of you have no doubt heard of Andy. He's been at the forefront of our community for a long time. He's been an evangelist at Tableau, and you've maybe seen him talking about the values of data viz, good practice. Maybe you've also seen him as a showman on the Iron Viz stage, showcasing the event that we all come to love at Tableau conference. Or maybe even you've purchased one of his books, 2 books actually, on dashboards. He's been talking about charts and dashboards for a long, long time. I wanted to take an opportunity to talk to Andy. We actually talk a lot in the background, but we just haven't hit record. So on this specific occasion, I said to Andy, before we say anything more about dashboards, let's hit record. And I also wanted to bring back this topic of the cost of building a dashboard. This is really why I got him on the channel, because I wanted to talk to him about how he sees this changing in the future. As ever, let's get stuck in. Andy, how are you doing?
I am very well, Tim. It is really great to be on the channel.
It's great to have you on the channel. I think it pains me that it's taken this long, frankly. Like, you have so much to share in this space, and yeah, we've talked a lot as well behind the scenes.
Indeed, well, I've been a keen follower of the channel for many years, so better late than never. Always a great opportunity. Here I am.
Amazing. We'll get on to so many topics today. I think it's always helpful for the audience to understand a bit about how you get into the roles that we all have. I'm a consultant. You've been an evangelist. I think it would be really valuable to just briefly touch on, how did you get into this field? Like, how did you make that transition? What were you doing before?
So, there's 2 answers to this. So remind me, I've got a second. So the first answer, we go all the way back to my A-levels, right? And I'm going to do my entire career history in about
Let's do it.
A minute. Left A-levels with a place on an art foundation course. I wanted to go and draw comics. I spent that summer in the Arctic and decided glaciers and geography were my future. So I did geography.
Right.
In geography degree, I discovered spreadsheets and computers and the internet. So I switched to a manufacturing information systems and programming masters. Got my first job as a software engineer, writing window box software with RM. Through that, so did a lot of coding, but also a lot of user experience, user testing. Then became a database administrator. So now we're about 2002. Got laid off from that. Spent a year bumming around New Zealand on a bike, writing for magazines and doing a lot of journalism. Then came back from that, started getting back into IT consultancy, joined a business research firm, interviewing CEOs of small companies, where I started building charts. I'll come back to that bit. Then got a job at University of Oxford as a data analyst, discovered Tableau in 2007, and joined Tableau in 2011. Right.
Amazing.
There you go. Career history. But the point being, when people ask me, how do you become a data analyst? And this was something Andy Kirk did way back in 2012. He said the 7 hats of data visualization and data analysis is you need to be a coder, a database knowledge person, a project manager, a communicator, a writer, and to an extent, a creative, right?
Yeah.
Well, not to an extent. I'm not going to shy away from that. You need to be a creative.
No, you are, yeah.
And, and then I look back at my career and I was like, well, I just bounced around with no real strategy, but I acquired all those skills that I needed to be a great data analyst. So that's kind of how I got into the field. And if people, want to take anything from that, those are the kind of skills you need. You don't need to be super deep in every one of them, but you need to at least be appreciative and maybe deep in 1 or 2. And then the specific catalyst for me becoming a data analyst was at this business research company. Right. This was about 2005. And basically, we each ran these league tables of fast-growing companies. And we had a boss who, let's just say, if you had a tick box of sociopath, he might have ticked them all. Right. So he would walk into the research room and he would just tear down they'll come down on somebody with absolute tirades of questions that were impossible to answer. And I mean, it was quite an interesting place to work, very high staff turnover. And I was like, it's really annoying when he comes and asks me these questions. Why don't I just create a printable set of charts that fits on one page in Excel that can be printed out on one page? So if he ever comes to me, I can be like, there, go away. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so that got him off my back. And then sometime after that, somebody said, oh, you've built a dashboard. I was like, have I? I didn't know that. But through that, hacking Excel, really enjoying playing with the data, just thinking, how can I communicate data to somebody to get them off my back? I built a dashboard. And that was a real catalyst. So then data analysis at the University of Oxford downloaded Tableau in 2007.
Yeah.
And, well,
the rest is history.
The rest is history. So diverse skills. Don't hide away from the humanities, critical thinking skills. They're really important. And I built a dashboard by mistake, and here I am.
Yeah. And I guess in a weird way, so would you say Tableau was like your first tool into this space, or were you dabbling with other tools like Excel and stuff along the way, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so it obviously sliding doors moment. So for the company prior to University of Oxford, I was beginning to get into the Excel community. There was loads of Excel user groups and calculations and macros. Oh, it was so good. I loved VBA. So had I not discovered Tableau, maybe I would have become a Microsoft MVP. Who knows? But then, so I loved Excel and Access, Microsoft Access. But then at the University of Oxford, I got the job, and it's like, well, we have Oracle Student Systems is our tool, and believe me, I still sort of get a slight shiver and goosebumps because it was the single worst piece of software ever. Right? It was controlled by our IT department. Our IT department were fine.
Right.
But it was just an appalling piece of software. Yeah. And so out of frustration, in about September, October 2007, I was like, I got the Google search. I was like, data visualization software. And that took me to Stephen Few's review of Tableau 3.5.
Yeah.
And I was like, save me from this OSS hell.
Yeah.
And then we created our own little shadow IT department running Tableau and Tableau Server. Much to the chagrin of our IT department. It changed everything.
Yeah. That's the story actually of early Tableau, right? A lot of under the desk servers and, land and expand kind of
absolutely.
vibes, right?
Yeah. I was the epitome of the land and expand use case. At that point, Tableau had one salesperson. Well, they had a few salespeople whose territory was in the US. Yeah. And then they had Todd Curry, whose territory was the world, right? If you think back how big Tableau is now. Todd was just like, please buy one license of Tableau. One license is all you need to buy.
Just one.
Yeah.
And then you'll love it, and then you'll use it. Incredible. And so in your journey of evangelism, how would you say it's changed over the years, right? Because I guess when you started the role with Tableau, did you feel like you were an evangelist, or is this something that you arrived at more reflectively? Actually, this is the role I've been playing. Let's call it that, if that makes sense.
That's a really good way to frame the question, because obviously I get asked about evangelism quite a lot. But did I ever? No. I started blogging about Tableau. I ran the first ever user group. Andy Kriebel and I ran the first user groups on different continents at the same.
Right.
Well,
yeah.
I will claim the first. He will claim the first. But it's so far in the past. Anyway, but the point is, I was just driven to learn and share. Right. So I also started blogging about what I was learning about Tableau and being really active on the forum. This was about 2009. And at that point, there was just this sense of thrill of using this product, which was clearly going to disrupt the entire industry.
Yeah.
And excitement that there was a bunch of people, we were all learning this stuff together. And it's like, well, how can you do that? How can you fix it? Also, it was the start of Twitter. Twitter had just started. So it was prime time to really be able to actually build a name. It's obviously a lot harder to do that now, but that was an important part of it. And so when I joined Tableau, at that point, getting into Tableau was like 5 interviews with all the co-founders and really robust interview process. But I had one interview and a blog about a viz-in-viz tooltip, the Cotgreave tooltip, right? And a bunch of other hacks, right?
I remember that.
Yeah, right? So this was basically, I made charts in tooltips using Unicode characters. And they're faster than viz-in-viz tooltips. And so I'd done all of these cool things and I'd ran a user group. And so clearly they already knew, well, this guy is just oozing Tableau already.
Yeah.
And so I just joined in Tableau as a marketing I had kind of a wide responsibility, but I was always evangelizing. It was again, the company was small enough. Yeah. The dream was just go out and get people to see Tableau. And then in 2016, I formally became the evangelist. And again, that wasn't much of a transition. It was just, I was given the leeway to go and be passionate about the field, make content that informs, educates, and entertains, and through that bring people to Tableau. And
amazing.
I mean, what a privileged and amazing job it was.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. I think, as you're saying it, I feel like to an extent, every analyst in a company whose role it is to work with data, to an extent, has a morsel of that evangelism role in that job, right? And I always wonder if sometimes companies don't recognize that. We see sort of centers of excellence, which kind of try and business operationalize the functions of an evangelist, but they sometimes fall short because they're too procedural, right? They don't quite capture what I'm seeing in you talk, which is the energy, the passion, a little bit of the spontaneity, actually, just going in the direction of an idea because you can, right? And so I often wish companies had evangelists for data to go out and tell people about the value of working with data, not just the value of working with the tools that they have.
So there's two really right. So one of my kids was diagnosed with ADHD a few years ago, and we didn't pursue a diagnosis for me, but I did all the things, and it's like literally most of those traits. And whether or not I'm ADHD, certainly I am very, very scattery. My mum used to. Right. I mean, my mum was like, "When you were a kid, Andy, I just used to find you playing with Lego in the doorway," and I'd be like, "Well, that's where I decided to play Lego. So why would I complete the previous task? I would just do the task." Yeah. And as I look, I mean, I was a nightmare to manage, right? Because my best content was the stuff where I was doing something at a keyboard, or I was out for a walk, and this idea would come bounced into my head, and I could not do anything but follow that idea to completion.
Yeah.
Which from a manager trying to do a strategy for evangelism, those poor guys, it was a disaster. But the highest performing content I ever made at Tableau was the ones that came out of those ideas, right? And so, I was something of an unpredictable handful. But back in the earlier days of Tableau, that flexibility fitted exactly where we were. And so I rode that wave for a long time. Yeah. And it means if you are ADHD, those are superpowers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That spontaneity and focus is an absolute superpower. And if you can find employees who lean into it, good luck.
Yeah, absolutely. And we call them data leaders, I guess, generally, when we talk about it. I always think like companies or the corporate sector comes up with like refined terms for the things that already exist, right? So data leaders to me are just evangelists for the data practice or analytics capabilities in their fields, and they might be sort of sector specific, but it's good. Now, in sort of your role as evangelist, I'm sure you come across a lot of experiences and ideas and thoughts, and I want to assume that is what sort of led you into publishing, right? So you've written 2 books, but I want to sort of first talk about the first experience of writing a book, and then we'll talk about the second one in a minute. So, like, what were you doing as an evangelist that then led you to say, "Hey, you know what? I've got something to share here. I need to put it somewhere. Let's start with the book."
I wrote an email to Alyssa Fink, who was the first CMO of Tableau in 2010, saying, "I'm going to write a book."
Okay.
And at that point, I loved O'Reilly's cookbooks, right? There was the Microsoft Access cookbook was the best tech book I ever had, because it was just pick and choose recipes, and I was like, I'm going to do that. Then I just got too excited about being in Tableau, and it never arose. And then at Tableau Conference 2016, Austin, Steve Wexler and Jeff came up to me and said, "Oh, Andy, would you be interested in writing a book about dashboards with us?" And they got me right at the right time. I didn't know at the time I was the third person they had asked. I'm always slightly dismayed that I wasn't. But anyway, I jest. Or do I jest?
Save the best time last.
Exactly. Thank you, Tim. That's the therapy I needed. But that was the perfect timing. Again, I'd just become Evangelist, so Tableau were like, yeah, brilliant, off you go. And so that was Big Book of Dashboards, 2017.
I was going to say.
And this one just hit a niche. There was loads of books about data visualization at that point, but nobody had written a newer book about dashboards. Right. Stephen Few had done one a lot longer ago, but that was quite a negative tone and already a bit outdated. So we hit that niche.
Yeah.
And it was, that evangelism in me was like, I have to write a book. I've got to write a book. I realized I could write, right. I'd have knowledge, and it was the right time and place for that book. And so, the whole process, 20 months from about 20 months it took from that 2016 to publication of the book. Hard work, seriously hard work, can be very, very demoralizing at points, can be really frustrating at points. There's a lot of early nights, a lot of early mornings, a lot of late nights, but it was brilliant. Was delighted with the output.
Yeah, and I think I've worked in print magazine design, which is not quite the same as publishing. Publishing is like a very different thing, but very familiar with the editorial process, the actual, I'm going to call it the grift of putting together a production, which is what it is. People don't sometimes, it's not a matter of just going into Word and bashing out the pages. There are then sort of very functional steps, screenshots, images, making sure they're the right resolution, getting editor's notes back, being told half your images aren't good enough, all of this stuff back and forth. One of the challenges of being Andy, I won't attribute it to anything, is that I don't like finishing projects. Right.
So I like writing.
Yeah.
Of course, when you write a book, your first draft is half of the process, right? And so, that second half of the process, thank God for Steve and Jeff,
drawn out,
who were good completer finishers, but I was not. Yeah. And images, oh my God, yeah, we were very. We asked all authors, what's the hardest thing about writing a book? Images. So we asked Wiley, how do you want your images? They told us. We delivered that. And then we went to proofs, and they went, "Oh, your images are all wrong." So we had to redo every single image, and that was where I was like, "I can't do that." Unfortunately, Jeff had the determination to do it.
Yeah. I have so much. I used to design magazines in the university, and so we had like 50 images in one magazine, so it was very easy to fix these kinds of things. But occasionally, this was back in the days before AI, where you could do like AI enhance, right? Like, so if there was an image that wasn't right, what we had to do is sort of creatively create pixels. So it's right, if this is not sharp enough, I have to now go create a Photoshop scene and add stuff around the image to make it.
Oh my God! Here's a story your audience will appreciate, right? Actually, so here's a random image from the book, right? Thin lines, right? Now, as a data viz designer, everything there is deliberate and with intent.
Yeah.
And we got our first proofs back, so we'd sent a draft, and Wiley sent us, "Here's your page layouts." And we printed them out. We were kind of reading the things, and I think all three of us simultaneously were going, "Oh, their axis line's a bit thick." And is that the colour? Is that the actual colour we put? And why has that gone there? And what they'd done is that their layout people had assumed that our thin axes and our small fonts were accidents, right? Because they thought, well, they're not high contrast enough. So they had taken it upon themselves to start redrawing half the images because it needed to be. Yeah, and we're like, what are you doing? It's like, well, your images are all wrong because the grey isn't black enough. It's just like, no. It's all very standard. Oh my God! So anyway, that was the moment. We're like, thin grey lines and thin grey lines in the background of a chart for a reason. Why don't you read the first chapter of the book and then you would have done it?
Yeah. And then you get the book out. I think it's easily probably one of the most respectable books on dashboards. But I get the sense you felt that you needed, something wasn't said. You had unfinished business because you did it again.
We did it again. So as of September 2025, the follow-up Dashboards That Deliver came out, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we did it again. Like the band getting back together. We recruited a new band member, Amanda McCulloch, fiercely intelligent woman who's led Data Viz Society for several years and does incredible client work focusing in the health industry. And well, she became a co-host of Chart Chat with us back in 2020, right?
Yeah.
And the thing that was right. So the first book is very much like here's 28 scenarios and a little introduction of data visualization and laying dashboards out. And people are like, well, that's great, but how do you build it? Well, what's the process? What's the process? And we didn't even touch on that in the first book. So the second book is all about the framework. Have I got the framework? Anyway, I haven't got it to hand. But it's all about a framework, a production framework. And, Amanda spearheaded that based on her experience, but we've come up with this unique framework for dashboard development about, where does the spark come from? How do you work with the users to prototype, development phase, release, maintenance, and re-release or death of dashboards, right?
Yeah.
And that's what the new book is about, because we've got asked it so many times, and we're like, well, we've let everybody down with the first book. So it's a framework.
I don't think you let everybody down.
Application development.
You piqued their curiosity. You piqued their curiosity. They wanted more.
We set the stage for another book. Yeah, indeed. Right. So that's what led to the second book. And another 2 years of my life.
Yeah.
And how to came. Yeah.
But did you feel like the second time round, the experience was, you knew what you were in for? And so I'd like to think also maybe the technology has changed over that time, high resolution monitors, maybe the images were easy to take. I don't know. Like I'm making some, I'm making some assumptions, but maybe I'm just wrong. It's just as painful the first time.
I don't think the process was any easier the second time around at all. Right.
Fine.
You still have to put words onto paper or words. You still have to put words in. You still have to make a structure. And images are still a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And then the other challenge is when, with three people, you've only got like three decision vectors. You put in a fourth person and suddenly just making decisions becomes a lot harder. Right. And with three, democracy is great in three because there's always a minority, whereas four, you get split decisions on strategy. So, that's not Amanda's fault. That's just four people.
That's just
with
how it works.
Strong opinions.
Yeah.
So,
If
anything,
you're
it was
passionate.
Harder. We're all passionate. Yeah. It's harder.
But that leads to a better product because, like with the example you gave with the images that got sort of doctored by the design team, those things existed that way for a reason. So actually, you can maybe say that the second book, because it's had 4 of you involved, like the experience of writing the first book, a little bit more time in the industry, that challenge only leads to a better product, right? And everything in the book is there explicitly for a reason.
Exactly. I mean, obviously, it's in the purview of people who read the book to make the decision on how good it is, but they can rest assured that more people have seen it, more experience has been put into it, and more arguments have been had over every single figure. And if you like it, please put a review on Amazon. Thank you very much.
Of course. We'll put a QR code up on screen so you can just grab your phone and add it to your basket and make sure you follow through the purchase. Right. So there's been this theme, and this is related to dashboards, still on the topic of dashboards, around, two concepts. So I think I'll just set the scene a little bit. In the last, let's say, 5 to 6 years, we've seen vendors introduce what I would call consumption pricing. So essentially paying to access your data. The biggest and best, easiest examples to talk about are Snowflake and Databricks, who have a consumption model for how you access your data from the database. Now, in broad terms, I think this is actually quite useful because it allows IT teams to not have to invest into, like, let's say, IT infrastructure for their databases. And it also allows them to scale up and scale down their resources. I sound like a salesman for one of these companies right now, but but it does it does genuinely offer advantages, especially for customers who have challenges at scale, like sudden scale, let's say Christmas, Black Friday kind of scale issues, right? So that's one side, and that's actually been quite a positive change in the industry. I see a lot of customers very happy with the way they use Snowflake. It enables data sharing and all that stuff. On the flip side, though, I feel like this model has creeped into the topic of dashboards, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea that you can decompose the analytical queries between your database all the way to a dashboard and essentially put a pricing model all the way up that chain. And I feel like that is very much alive and well. And it's alive and well in two ways. The first way I see, and Sigma Analytics is a good example of this, where they don't have a concept of an extract. They always connect live to the database. So their product perceptively looks cheaper on the price thing because it's just a much simpler product than something like Power BI or Tableau. But you'll see the cost in Snowflake, right? Because you're using up a lot more consumption, you're using up a lot more. So you're sort of almost offsetting the cost in some ways. And that's not always true. I'm simplifying it a little bit. But I think also we are now seeing this idea of actually we're going to charge you for every query that your dashboard accesses from not just your database, but actually all the way up through the chain. And it made me sort of laser focus in on, hey, we're actually getting to the point where it's going to be possible to look at your bill at the end of the year for one of these technologies and actually see that this dashboard cost us this amount of dollars, right? And at that point, this question of, well, is this dashboard worth it, really starts to ring home. And so there's two sides of the discussion. First of all, like, what is a dashboard worth and how do we assign value to a dashboard? And then sort of all the knock-on consequences from that, I guess, are like the conversation. So I've said a lot. I've set the scene.
Yeah.
I sort of love your opinion, at least on sort of what you've heard so far, and then we can dig into it a bit more. Yeah.
I've written down 1, 2, 3. I've written down 4 counterpoints to you, right? So this could take.
This is why you're here. This is why you're here.
And now we also need to put a link somewhere to the. You've already done a video on.
I've done a video about this. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
In which I felt you were being very optimistic to the user about, or maybe
I like to be optimistic.
Yeah, right. So
I can't be otherwise until the doom has actually arrived, right?
Right. Okay.
I'm purely speculating. So.
Here comes the doom. Right. So I think flexible pricing on the database level is advantageous until it becomes a surprise. You know, if you don't anticipate those spikes, that can actually then be a disaster. Let's talk about exploratory data analysis. In order to create a dashboard, you are exploring your data. The core founding principle of Tableau was that the cost of curiosity was zero, right? Not just because there wasn't a cost to query the data, but because drag and drop was so fast. Yeah, you know, anybody who's used Tableau knows you can create 100 charts in 3 minutes, keep only one of them, but you still got 99 perspectives of the data.
Correct.
Right. So you're getting a vast sense of the data, even if your output just sales over time. You've understood geospatial, product-based things, all the other things, right? Yeah. So, in order to hone in on the best articulation of the data, it requires consumption and curiosity and aspiration. Yeah. So, charging people for that and saying, "Well, you know what? Maybe be less curious," I would say is antithetical to the founding principles of Tableau.
Yeah.
Optimizing a dashboard, this is something, you talked about this a lot in your video. Certainly this was discussed at Tableau when they were talking about pricing. It's like, well, how do you design a dashboard to optimize for query-based pricing? And suddenly it's like, well, you could build a dashboard with 20 charts on it and 10 filters, and there are a Stephen Few style dashboard, a big executive overview. That's a really effective dashboard. Print that out, and a CEO can see an overview of every part of their organization. That's a disaster in consumption-based pricing because every single one of those is a query, every filter is an operation. And suddenly you're like, oh no, we can't do that. Perhaps we need to combine charts into one. So instead of using 2 bar charts, do side-by-side bar charts. But then, oh my God, then you've created things that are going to look awful, right? And you're basically dumbing down the potential in order to save cost. So that, well, I would love the world to be, when I design a dashboard or when anybody's designing a dashboard, they are designing the best asset for the end users to achieve their goal, right?
Yeah.
And I've paid for my licenses, I've paid for my data analysts, and they know their stuff. So if that is a 40 chart or a 40 sparkline, 5 filter, dense dashboard, then that is a success. If I then have to go, well, Mr. or Mrs. or Madam or Ms. Data Analyst, you've also got to factor in cost. That just to me doesn't seem like a sensible solution. If anything, it feels like going back to the world of cubes, which one of Christian Chabot's first keynotes that I ever saw, he laughed his head off at cubes because of what it does to data and design.
Yeah.
So I'm not a fan of anything that reduces anything that increases the cost of curiosity is a problem. I will add, as analytics products become more as LLMs, rightly or wrongly, for good or bad, leak into or barge into whatever adjective, whatever the verb is, as they get into the analytics thing. LLM queries are not cheap, right?
Yes,
and if you take Andy's mantra and go, do 10,000 quick prompts to LLM in this analytics session. That genuinely is a cost problem. So I adamantly believe we shouldn't be increasing the cost of curiosity, and we shouldn't be adding cost to the right design. I appreciate there's a challenge.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that point you bring out around LLMs is interesting. I've always been a champion of this idea. Let's go back 3 years. Tableau had machine learning in the product already. We had explained data, asked data. We had the concept of metrics and asked data lenses as well. These concepts already existed. Now they used what I would call more statistically reliant sort of components of what we would now call AI. So these things now fall under the AI banner. And there's even this feature in desktop where you can connect to a table and it tells you what other people have connected to who've also connected to that. This was before AI. That would be now called like smart tables or something in today's AI world, right? So I always like to highlight that we had this level of feature set in the pre-AI world without what I would call the massive inference costs of LLMs.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if we've sort of just replaced it and not sort of thought about where the useful places to have an LLM would be. And I've always challenged Tableau on, the AI features that maybe got focused on first, to me weren't necessarily the best ones. There were so many other use cases that I've always thought, man, why didn't you start over here? This one is such an obvious example, right? But yeah.
I think Ask Data was not great on version 1.
Yeah.
By the time when we turned it off, it actually began to be my entry point into data sets, right? I was like, actually, you could type queries, the tokenization was great, and you could change the tokens in the query or change the viz. And it was actually pretty cool. Yeah. And then it was decided to turn it off because LLMs could do all of that. I'm not sure they can say whether I think that was a good or bad decision, but I'll let my face. Right, go on. Well, what do you think, Tim?
I don't think it was a good idea. We still don't have that in the little Einstein thing on the right hand side.
Exactly,
nowhere near as good as what it used to be. Yeah.
And that ThoughtSpot was coming up with better tokenization and editable stuff like that. I'm now doing work with Visu. The way you can edit the tokens in Visu is great, right? So there were decisions to go, well, hey, LLMs everywhere. You said it. I won't say my opinions, but I agree. So I think that's a challenge. And then what was the other part of that? The features, right? The brilliance about the way Tableau used to do it was it was using machine learning to let the analysts do things more quickly.
Correct.
One of the, I don't know if you saw Adobe's recent tech conference, but a lot of the Adobe features they announced in the last, it was a couple of months ago. I can't remember.
Adobe Max, yeah.
Adobe Max. A lot of the AI stuff they did there was basically, here's a menu option. We can get you to do the thing under that menu option faster, right? So it's going back to that brilliance of AI, going, well, I'm an Adobe user. I'm using Photoshop or Illustrator, and I'm still doing the work I do, but it's just all made more efficient.
It's just driving.
And that was those great parts of those features we added to Tableau as well. And I was really taken by that Adobe conference, because it's that recognition that if you just try and turn everything into an agent, well, we could run the whole thing just by prompts. It's like, well, we can't. It's just, we've worked out over the last 2 years. It's the context of every one of those operations is far too complex. Yeah. And, so maybe Adobe recognizing that, and maybe we'll see a swing back to the end user assisted by simple, tangible, or simple, manageable machine learning AI-based tasks.
Yeah, and I'll also add that generative BI, as I'd like to call it, this idea of you type something into a text box and out comes a visualization. It is only really enabled by what I would call really excellent semantic modeling all the way through your data infrastructure. And honestly, not many companies have invested in that in the past, right?
That's such an understatement, right? Tim, you work with clients all the time. Have you ever found an organization that has managed to define a good semantic layer?
No, it's very tough. It's very tough.
So I think, generative AI, generative AI BI. Good God, I don't even know what we're going right.
Gen BI, they call it, but yeah.
Gen, I hate that.
It's a bad word. I'm not going to lie.
It requires a semantic layer. Now, we've been banging on about semantic layers, right? Brinton, 1914, 110 years ago, he was talking about semantic layers. That. And companies don't do it because it's too hard. And businesses change. And, there's always, Tim's in publishing, and he's got the Google sheet that actually runs the business, right? So it's just too hard. Yeah. And yet, it's absolutely fundamental to make this stuff work. And how do we make those two meet? I don't know. The other aspect, I remember, a lot in Tableau marketing, we were like, but Google Analytics is driven by AI. Google Analytics does have a really good semantic layer, right?
Correct.
If you measure your hits
every
through semantics,
detail,
it does have every detail. So there's an example of a really strong semantic layer that can be AI'd to the max really effectively. But in real businesses, it gets very messy.
Yeah. So if I bring it back to sort of this topic on the value of a dashboard, it feels like sort of several things are happening all at the same time. Businesses are realizing the importance of the semantic model. They sort of, I see data engineering being probably, look, if you were coming into the data space today, and maybe this is controversial to say, and you ask me, should I be a data analyst or a data engineer? I would push you towards the data engineer space, because I think you will land a job faster and you'll have way more runway than a data analyst today. That's not to say that data analysts are going anywhere. I think they still exist. If anything, data analysts haven't talked enough about how much data modeling they do. And so it's kind of hidden the problem from their senior colleagues. And now they've clocked on that the role for that is data engineering, when actually many analysts were sort of shadow data engineers anyway. Yeah. That's obviously going to spin up a bunch of, investment in technology and infrastructure. So adding to the cost, we've then got this, let's say you sort out your semantic model. Let's say you do start to have AI in your dashboard. We still have this sort of unrealized challenge of measuring the value of a dashboard. So we talked about the cost of a dashboard. That's very separate from the value, because the value can outweigh the cost. And I think in your book, when you talk about dashboards that deliver, the thing that I think you're sort of, maybe it goes unsaid, the thing you're delivering is value, all right? It's sort of intrinsic value in the quality of decision making, or in the quality of people's ability to solve a problem. And so if I sort of challenge you a little bit, how would you I mean, we can talk about this together as well. How would you start to help someone tackle how they answer this question? Like, what are not necessarily how do they calculate it, but what parts of their business would they look to help answer that question? Who would they be talking to, and sort of how would they be thinking about this? Because I think this is the thing that's unsaid today. If I'm going to evaluate Tableau next, and I have this dashboard, and I know it's going to cost me $5,000 a year to run this dashboard, like, who do I go to say, is this of value to the business, right?
So I'll preface this answer with, I still don't think I have a great answer to this. I think I agree, this is still one of the hardest things to do, right? So in Dashboards That Deliver, we interviewed loads and loads of people about how do they measure value of dashboards. Yeah. And there are loads of different answers, right? Some people in the very early development phase, they go, what is the decisions that will be made from this dashboard? What is the benefit? They get the stakeholders to quantify the business value of those decisions. Yeah, that's fine. And then a disciplined team working together will follow up and basically evaluate whether that decision was made. I think that's a really good approach, right? The other common method is that it is in some ways a really tedious method, because the answers are qualitative rather than quantitative, right?
Right.
I can't necessarily tell you that the dashboard I was using in Tableau marketing for the last 3 years made me make any, I can't show you a binary field in a database that says that dashboard was worth $6 million. But I can tell you, I went and used that dashboard every day, and it gave me a really good sense of what content and what content succeeds and doesn't.
Right.
It's like, so you can get that from surveys. Surveys are so boring and tedious, and nobody answers them, right? And what if Tim says it was great, but Tim's colleague says it was rubbish? It's like, well, who's right? And then one of my favorite ever quotes about a Tableau dashboard was, this used to be on the story, was Jonathan Kappa, who works at Aer Lingus. He's still there. He's the data whisperer. He has leeway to go and find insights. But he said to us back in 2014, he's like, we were looking at a dashboard. We spotted a problem with engine production. Bang, bang, bang. 2 more minutes in Tableau. We changed production and saved millions of dollars, right? So I love the quote, because bang, 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 2 minutes in Tableau. I mean, that is exactly what.
Yeah.
But that's what people want. It's like something we didn't anticipate was exposed in a dashboard, and I got to a new answer and an actionable insight very, very quickly. Brilliant. Was that dashboard designed for that decision? I can't assume it was.
Who knows?
Right?
Yeah.
But it's that thing. So I don't know. I'm just going to come out with it. Is measuring the value of your dashboards like measuring the value of your toilets? If you took all the toilets away from your business, you would notice. You would recognize that they had value.
Yeah.
But you couldn't ask anybody in your business. It's like, how much is that toilet worth to you as an employee?
Yeah.
And I don't love that answer. Well, I mean, I love the answer because it's daft, right? But it feels like a cop-out. If I was a CDO and I tried to say that to my CFO, that might not,
because the CFO has a price.
Yeah, right. But then the toilets do have a price too, right? They are a infrastructure asset necessary to run an organization that has employees on site. I'll that's the best
Leave it
I've got. Yeah. Toilets.
Yeah. No, it's a good analogy, because if I look at procurement teams and I look at just conversations that I've been in around, let's call it price, the price of, not just the price of an analytics tool, but this idea that I think Tableau talked a lot about for a long time, total cost of ownership, right? Not just how much it costs to put the software in, but also the cost to train people, the cost to deploy it, the cost to IT to manage it, and then do all the things you need to do to make it work. Just because you have Tableau doesn't mean you can't ignore like your network infrastructure to make those data connections work from laptop to database. Like all of that has to go in, but we don't put that on the price of a Tableau license. Tableau can only tell you the price of what they believe their product is worth, right? The value they perceive to you as a business. And that has always been a moving goalpost. We've seen it from seat-based licensing to subscription pricing. And now we're at, this sort of consumption pricing / subscription pricing / bundles / lots of things, which all makes it very hard to track these things as well. I'm not going to ignore that fact. But there are just some things like in your car, you need wheels to get about, right? If I took your tires or gave you a flat tire, you'd suddenly realize the value of a tire, right?
Yeah.
But it's by no means the biggest cost. It's probably the most easiest thing in a car to replace. Like for £100 or $100, you could replace a tire like that and your car's back on the road. Without it, it's useless. So it's very much I think it's an evolving problem, and I think it's about to get even harder because what generative BI seemed to suggest is that not only analysts will be building dashboards, but actually generative tools will be taking those and running away with them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think do we even need dashboards, right? I think we anybody in a position of data strategy leadership should also validly be questioning, should we need a dashboard's the right asset, right? Yeah, clearly. I just wrote a book about them. I have skin in the game. But if you have a business user, a task and an output, then a dashboard is still a bottleneck, right? Now, if they can self-serve, then that dashboard becomes less of a bottleneck. But, the dream, if I could just type into an AI or some Gen AI thing going, I need to create a new marketing campaign. What is the hot trend of our customers right now? And it tells you the answer without you needing to go to a dashboard. Then, hey, let's kill all the dashboards. That's great. We are not there. We are not there. But that is an aspiration, and that gap is probably shrinking. There are thousands of AI startups trying to reduce the time of that bottleneck, right? So, again, one can measure the impact of a dashboard if one is a dashboard building team or center of excellence, but you need to be measuring the investment in your data and the decisions being made, which is even harder and beyond. Maybe the third book. I don't know.
Maybe the third one. I'm opening the door. And you touch on something there, which is, I will say, I've really enjoyed the emergence of what I would call the metric, right? So this idea of, which actually has always existed in Tableau. It's existed in Tableau in the sense that in Tableau, I can take a dimension, I can take a measure, I can pin it to a time dimension and write a calculation and put it on a chart. And that is what we know today as a metric in Tableau Pulse or in other tools. It's basically the same concept. And I really like this concept because what I think it's allowed for is this little opportunity for people to say, I don't need a dashboard. I just need to know this one answer. Mm-hmm. And actually, if you can give me a data model, which Tableau and many other tools have invested in, I think Power BI has had it for a long time. Sigma's just launched it in their capability. So data modeling is now prevalent in pretty much all BI tools.
Yeah.
This idea of being able to enable this way of thinking, this sort of atomized way of thinking, I think is really helpful because I think it helps take the pressure off a dashboard. A dashboard can be better because metrics exist. Metrics can also help be citizens in a dashboard without you having to go and rebuild them from scratch, which makes spending time on a dashboard even better. So this to me has been a positive change, and I'd really love to see more in that direction, sort of atomizing the components that we call value and letting people sort of recompose them, to borrow Tableau's, composable data kind of analogy.
I love the irony. One of Tableau's senior sales leaders, when we launched Tableau Pulse 2 or 3, about a year into Pulse, he's like, with this update, we no longer need dashboards. We have Tableau Pulse. And then he scrolled through a set of pulse metrics, which are a set of bands, some spark lines, and some color indicating. So a collection of charts together to facilitate understanding. I'm like, a pulse metric is a dashboard, right? And again, so the definitions, I mean, the interesting thing about is the data analyst role disappearing? I think that's a really interesting question because I kind of have that sense that in a way, if you can engineer great semantics and expose those to natural language, then in a way that does put the analyst role at risk. But that means the engines building those views and outputs to end users need shit hot data analysts, because they're the ones who are going to be certain, because it'll be these guys surfacing those charts, surfacing the stories and descriptions. So it might be the analysts move into the LLMs and the Gen BI providers. Because somebody's still got to get everything we learned about cognitive science right.
Correct.
That knowledge hasn't got.
I've always, and everyone who knows me will know that I'll occasionally bring up Alteryx from time to time. Alteryx have this concept of a curator in the ecosystem. I actually really like it as a term for where I think data analysts are heading, in that for a long time, data analysts have been builders. They've been engineers of dashboards and data sets to answer these problems. I think going forward, they become curators. They become very deliberate sort of artisans of bringing together the right data sources, the right semantic models to be able to validate that these things can answer these questions. Not so much build the question, but they sort of create these sort of walled gardens where people can come and be free with the way they do data analysis. And then the other side of that is have them listening to signals that I think AI tools can pull forward to them. For example, hey, what is someone typing in that LLM window that we don't know, we can't ask yet, right? And showing people that question, standardizing terminology within an enterprise. I've worked in consumer goods, and one of the scenarios I've worked in when analyzing promotions is there's like 15 ways of calculating return on investment depending on the type of retailer, supplier, and all of that jazz. And to one team, it's just ROI. That's all they care about. But to the CEO, there's 15 different ROIs that he cares about. But there is also one global ROI number. And that syntax challenge, that semantic challenge, really underpins probably what the analyst has been solving for a long time. And I do feel with an LLM, a language model, we are maybe closer to actually having the technology to solve how we align that problem. It still needs the semantic understanding, and it still needs good data analysts. So curator to me feels like where I'm heading. Maybe not as many data analysts, but still a really important core body of them working alongside data engineers.
I think you need to bring the word context in here, which is subtly that you can define a lot of context in semantics, but you can't put in. There's no way you can put in 100% of the context.
Correct.
And that's where
you always
have to interpret. I think that's an important word to add to that equation.
Well, businesses change and innovate, and they're by definition. Like I said this yesterday to someone on a call, an LLM is only designed to look at past behavior and from that infer what might happen. They're like a really complicated statistical engine. If I say I'm going to, it's going to figure out, right, it's 11 o'clock. Tim's not had lunch yet. He's probably saying, I'm going to lunch. Right?
Exactly, right?
That is literally all an LLM is. It's nothing more. And so by definition, they can't help businesses intrinsically predict the future. They can infer, as inference is a topic in LLMs, but they can't suggest something that hasn't happened before. They just can't say. I mean, that's an opinion as well. I'm not like an LLM scientist or engineer to be able to say that with
But that same thing applies to dashboards. I mean, it used to frustrate the heck out of me when we go to customers and they'd be like, "Well, we've built the dashboards. We've kind of done our BI investment." And I'm like, "Wow, you built a dashboard." So that means, November 2025, you built it. You mean you're not going to have any new business questions from now on?
Yeah.
Your business is now defined and static. I'm like, brilliant. Don't want to be in your business because, of course, they change, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So keep the analysts, keep the humans.
Yeah, exactly. Right, before we finish, I'd love you to talk a bit more about the role you're doing today. Is it Viso? Am I saying that right?
Viso,
Viso.
Yeah.
So what was your role there?
Well, so I left Tableau, primarily dashboards that deliver was coming out. I've been in Tableau 15 years. I felt like I'd achieved everything I needed to achieve at Tableau. I was ready for a new thing, right? And, the goal was, I'm mid-50s. What am I doing with the rest of my career time, Tim? Well, I didn't ask you. I asked myself and my wife and my family and my friends. And it's like, okay, can I go out and do this independently? And that's the goal, right? So the goal is I've got another book to write. Talk about that when at the time is ready. But I want to do speaking, writing, and advising. Things are better in threes, so I need to drop one of those. And another big goal is, I have a lot of ethical issues with AI, right. But at the same time, it's here, and there is some really exciting stuff happening. And the analytical app landscape is fascinating at the moment. So I'm like, well, what are all these? Who's doing what and who's doing it well? And so what I'm doing with Visu for it's November 25, so that'll be for the next couple of months, is just exploring the product and sharing it to my channels. And Visu, they are not paying me to just say positive things. Right. But I will say it is the closest experience I have had to using Tableau back in 2007.
Right.
When I was like, oh, this is doing things that nobody else is doing in a really powerful way. And that isn't because it is a brand partnership. I'm getting paid. And I'm not saying that because of that. Yeah. A genuine. So hopefully people will see that over the videos. But it's got a long way to go. There are things that I'll share some of the frustrations as well. But that's the goal. So that's not a job. I'm not employed by them, but it's I'm working with them and
great opportunity.
Hopefully doing more things like that.
I'm really keen next year to I say lift the lid on what is I'm going to say a can of worms in the analytics space, because back in the day, if I just rewind 5-6 years, there were really 3 or 4 big players in the BI space. So you Tableau, Power BI, and then you had sort of what I would say like a cabal of Click, MicroStrategy, all these sort of companies that have been in the space for a long time. Yeah. I kind of just group them into one group of other, and then you have challenger tools. Very few of them today. I feel like they've all graduated to an extent, Sigma, Omni, Count, Hex, the list just goes on and on.
Yeah.
And it almost speaks to the commoditization of BI in a very sort of real way. It speaks to the challenge that obviously Microsoft and Power BI have, because lots of people are trying to enter the data space, and these tools are perfect because new users to data don't have as much requirements. So actually these new tools are very good starting points, right? And so I'd love to lift the lid on this next year and just go on a journey and just say, hey, if I was learning analytics today and I didn't have the baggage of having to deal with the sort of enterprise weight on me and all these things I've gotten sort of very comfortable with, and I just said, hey, I have nothing but Excel or Google Sheets. What could I elevate to? What does that look like?
That's largely my goal.
Exactly.
I'm not sure what's going to happen next with Visu, but I'd love to do this with other vendors as well, because there's some great potential. And I think that having the length in the career now that I have, I realized that the wisdom I've got, right? I joined Tableau when we first appeared on the Gartner BI quadrant, right? And all the big guys laughed at us. They were like, you can ignore Tableau. They're a toy. They're doing nothing. Buy our big enterprise software. And how we laughed as we disrupted the entire industry and changed everything. And then the challenge, Salesforce, Tableau, and the others, all those leaders find is that they are now incumbents, saddled with a huge baggage of legacy code. And so it's really hard fitting AI into those tools, because you've got these infinite answer machines that have to interface into the
50 different connections.
Right. Or they could build something completely new, both of which are disadvantageous against the startups who are down here in the quadrant, who have got none of that baggage. They're super agile. They don't have the scale, and they might not be enterprise ready, but Tableau wasn't 20 years ago, and hey, we turned the world upside down. It's really fun being around at this point, having been, well, I think for anybody, but having been through that myself, I'm excited. So I will join you in opening that can of worms.
Maybe I'll invite you back in 6 months just to like, just go through the tools we've used and tried and see what's in there. Yeah. And I also have to add, like, your Google Sheets and your Excels, they're weirdly becoming very powerful as well, right? Because AI is allowing them to do far more than they were ever designed to do. So
with super high risk, if anybody, the jagged frontier concept by Ethan Mollick is that, AIs can do really complex things really easily. Some really easy things it just can't do, and you're like, why can't you do that?
How?
But that frontier is invisible, right? Yeah, right. How many R's are in strawberry, right? Yeah. That frontier is that edge of knowledge is invisible. As human beings, we know what our own frontier of knowledge is, right? And that's immensely frustrating. Mm-hmm. The Copilot experience, I think, has that. When you hit something and it does it, that's amazing. It's really annoying when you're like, just change this column to red and it doesn't understand it.
Yeah.
And I've asked Copilot to do fairly basic Excel formulas. It does them, and they're wrong. And you're like, well, so when you then tell, Tim, CEO, we should sell apples, not bananas, and that was based on a Copilot error, who's responsible for that? Well, it's me. Yeah. You've talked about that. You've said in previous videos, it's like, it's taken analysts years to build trust, and it takes minutes to lose it. I thought that was great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Right, Andy, thank you so much. It's been great to talk. Obviously, we talk all the time, but this was a great conversation, I think, to have in the open, because I think you have so much to share on the topic, and you come from a place of authority with your experience as an evangelist and the books as well. So I was keen to hit record and just have the conversations we've had anyway for a long time.
Yeah. It's been great.
Right?
Yeah.
I think we said this before, right? Yeah. We had a conversation like this in the past, and I said we should have hit record. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll get you back very soon.
All right, that'd be great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Tim.